What if the blind could see, not with their eyes, but with their mind? Near-death experiences, NDEs, in blind individuals, even those blind from birth, reveal a shocking paradox: detailed, vivid vision without functioning eyes or a lifetime of sight. Researchers call it Mindsight, a form of perception beyond the brain's known limits. Some describe floating above their bodies, witnessing medical emergencies they couldn't have seen, or encountering radiant beings in realms of light. Are these hallucinations, or proof that consciousness exists beyond the body? Skeptics argue the brain is playing tricks, but when the congenitally blind, with no visual memory, report accurate, complex visuals, science struggles to explain. If true, this phenomenon could rewrite our understanding of reality itself. Is the mind more than the brain? The answer might lie in the stories of those who've glimpsed the impossible. Introduction to the phenomenon and its profound implications. The study of near-death experiences, NDEs, consistently presents phenomena that challenge conventional scientific paradigms. Among the most perplexing and potentially transformative of these are reports of visual perception by individuals who are blind, particularly those blind from birth. This central paradoxite, without functioning eyes or established visual neural pathways, strikes at the core of our understanding of consciousness, perception, and the mind-brain relationship. The assertion that individuals who have never known sight might see during an NDE is precisely why this domain of research is often described as mind-blowing. It carries the potential to fundamentally alter our most basic assumptions about how we experience reality. The investigation of such extraordinary claims necessitates a rigorous and critical approach. As often noted in scientific inquiry, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The implications are profound. If consciousness can indeed generate or access visual information independently of the typical biological apparatus, then current neurocentric models of consciousness are, at best, incomplete. The study of NDEs in the blind, therefore, can be viewed as a form of natural experiment, probing the very limits of these models. Furthermore, the language used by experiencers to describe these perceptions, often resorting to terms like seeing or vision, may itself be a metaphorical approximation for a more complex, holistic form of awareness that transcends ordinary sensory categories. The astonishing claim that blind persons, including those blind from birth, can see during NDEs or out-of-body episodes, OBEs, has been notably explored in groundbreaking work by researchers Kenneth and Sharon, framing the significance of this inquiry. The inherent difficulty for congenitally blind individuals to conceptualize visual phenomena makes their reported experiences particularly compelling, suggesting that the vision they describe might be qualitatively different from normative sight, hinting at an epistemological challenge in capturing the essence of such experiences within our current lexicon. Mindsight. Groundbreaking research on NDS in the blind. The question of whether blind individuals, particularly those blind from birth, can experience visual phenomena during NDEs has been a subject of intense interest and research, as it directly confronts conventional understandings of perception. Kenneth and Sharon Cooper's Mindsight study. Among the most significant contributions to this area is the work of Dr. Kenneth and Sharon Cooper, Near-Death and Out-of-Body Experiences in the Blind, a study of apparent eyeless vision, published in the Journal of Near-Death Studies, Near-Death and Out-of-Body Experiences in the Blind. Their research investigated the NDEs and OBEs of 31 blind individuals. This sample included 14 individuals who were congenitally blind, blind from birth, and others who were adventitiously blind, became blind later in life. The book Mindsight reportedly expanded on this, detailing findings from 41 blind participants. The primary methodology involved in-depth interviews, modeled on Ring's earlier NDE research, but adapted for blind respondents, with a particular focus on eliciting details about their sight history and any perceptions during their experiences that could, in principle, be corroborated by external witnesses or medical records. The core findings of Ring and Cooper's research were striking. Blind individuals, including those blind from birth, do report classic NDEs with features common to those described by sighted persons. A significant majority of these blind participants claim to have some form of seeing or visual perception during their NDEs or OBEs. Specifically, among the 14 congenitally blind individuals in the 1,997 study, 9 described experiencing vision during their NDEs. The concept of Mindsight, to describe the unique nature of the perceptual experiences reported by their blind participants, Ring and Cooper introduced the term Mindsight or transcendental awareness. They emphasized that this was not sight in the conventional optical sense. Instead, Mindsight was characterized as a profound and holistic form of awareness, an ability to perceive from all angles and depths simultaneously, and a deep, inexplicable knowing of the subject or scene that transcended purely visual data. This perception was often described as synesthetic, potentially incorporating tactile, auditory, and other sensory impressions alongside what was reported as pictorial imagery. The term Mindsight thus represents a crucial conceptual innovation. It attempts to capture an experience that seemingly defies existing sensory and cognitive categories, signifying a shift from seeing as a passive reception of visual data processed by the eyes and brain to knowing as an active, holistic apprehension of reality. Given that blind NDEs, especially those congenitally blind, lack the established neural pathways and experiential reference for conventional sight, their descriptions of perception, e.g., awareness from all angles at once, an inherent understanding of what is perceived, do not align with the model of eye-based perspectival vision. Mindsight, therefore, serves as a necessary term for a qualitatively different mode of awareness, suggesting that consciousness might, under certain conditions, access information in a more direct, unmediated way than through discrete sensory channels. The Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, NDERF, founded by Dr. Jeffrey Long, has also played a role in collecting and disseminating NDE accounts, including those from blind individuals. NDERF's website serves as a public archive for thousands of NDE narratives submitted by experiencers worldwide using a detailed questionnaire. Research drawing from the NDERF database often highlights the consistency of NDE features and the high degree of lucidity reported by experiencers. For instance, an NDERF survey of 122 NDEs found that 74.4% reported experiencing more consciousness and alertness than normal during their NDE. NDERF also references and supports the findings regarding vision in blind NDERs, often citing Ring and Cooper's work as the largest study on the topic. One NDERF publication mentions an investigation, likely referring to Ring's study, involving 31 blind or substantially visually impaired individuals, 14 of whom were blind from birth, with 9 of these congenitally blind individuals describing vision during their experiences. This investigation presented case reports of those born totally blind describing NDEs that were highly visual and consistent with typical NDEs. Furthermore, the studies reviewing OBEs reported on the NDERF website have found a high percentage of accuracy, ranging from 92% to 97.6%. In the descriptions of earthly events observed from an out-of-body perspective, the methodological reliance on retrospective qualitative case studies in foundational research like Ring and Cooper's Mindsight, while providing rich, in-depth narratives, inherently faces challenges. These include concerns about the accuracy of memories reported years after the event, the potential for interviewer bias, and the generalizability of findings from small samples points often raised by skeptics. While NDEs frequently report that their memories of the experience are exceptionally vivid and stable over time, the retrospective nature of the accounts remains a methodological consideration. However, the NDERF's large database approach 7, though also often relying on self-reports, allows for the identification of patterns and consistencies across a much wider range of experiences. The emergence of similar visual descriptions independently from numerous blind individuals in such a large dataset can lend greater weight to the phenomenon than isolated anecdotes, potentially mitigating some concerns about the idiosyncratic nature of single case studies. Case studies in focus. Narratives of vision from the blind. The most compelling way to understand the phenomenon of vision in blind NDEs is through their own accounts. The research by Ring and Cooper, as well as reports from NDERF, provide several detailed narratives. Congenitally blind individuals. Individuals blind from birth lack any prior visual frame of reference, making their reports of visual experiences during NDEs particularly intriguing. Vicky Umipeg. Vicky was born prematurely and became completely blind shortly after birth due to excessive oxygen in an incubator, damaging her optic nerves. She had 2 NDEs, the first at age 12 and a second, more detailed one at age 22, following a severe automobile accident. Vicky stated unequivocally, "Those 2 experiences were the only time I could ever relate to seeing and to what light was because I experienced it." I was able to see. During her second NDE, she described an OBE where she found herself near the ceiling of the emergency room, looking down at her own body on a metal table as medical staff worked on her. She saw her long hair, part of which had been shaved, a detail that upset her, observed her head was cut open, and saw a lot of blood. Though she noted she still had no concept of color, she reported floating through the hospital ceilings and, for the first time, seeing trees, birds, and people. Her experience then transitioned to a heavenly realm of light and beauty, where she encountered and could see children she had known who had died, as well as deceased relatives and friends, including blind schoolmates. She was greeted by a radiantly glowing figure whom she understood to be Jesus, suggesting her experience was not shaped by prior knowledge of typical NDE narratives. Dr. Kenneth Ring highlighted her case as evidence of a blind individual being able to see during an NDE. Brad Barrows. Brad was blind from birth due to an unknown cause. At the age of 8, he had an NDE during a bout of severe pneumonia. 8. He recalled floating above his hospital bed and seeing his roommate leave the room to get help, a detail later confirmed. He then described ascending rapidly through the building until he was above the roof. At this point, he reported seeing with clarity a cloudy sky, snow-covered ground with plowed streets, distinct snowbanks, a streetcar, his school's playground, and a nearby hill. His journey continued through a tunnel from which he emerged into an immense field illuminated by a brilliant light, where he saw tall grass and trees with large leaves. He also heard beautiful music and encountered a glittering stone structure with a loving man inside before returning to his body. Marta Endurf case. An illustrative case shared by Endurf involves Marta, a 5-year-old girl blind from birth who had an NDE after walking into a lake and losing consciousness. She reported being pulled out by a beautiful lady dressed in bright white light. Marta described that as she traveled around the lake with this being, I saw detail that I would not have seen in real life, including the leaves on trees, the feathers and eyes of birds, and details on telephone poles. She stated her vision was far better than normal 20/20 sight. Adventitiously, blind individuals who become blind later in life retain visual memories, which could theoretically play a role in their NDEs. However, their accounts also often include perceptions beyond what memory could explain. Frank Ring Cooper study. Frank lost his sight completely in 1982 at age 66. Around 1992, he reported an OBE during which he saw himself lying on the couch. He specifically noted wearing a tie his friend had purchased for him, describing it as rose-colored with 2 gray circles on it. When his friend returned, Frank asked her if the circles on the tie were indeed gray, expressing surprise at his knowledge. While his friend generally corroborated Frank's account of the event and her buying him a tie, she could not definitively recall the tie's specific details or the exact sequence of events to fully substantiate his visual claim. Nancy Ring Cooper study. Nancy became blind shortly after a surgical procedure in 1991 at age 41 due to a medical error. While being rushed on a gurney for an angiogram, the gurney hit a closed elevator door, and Nancy had an OBE. She reported floating above the gurney and seeing her body below. Crucially, she also saw her son's father and her lover, Leon, standing down the hall, looking shocked. Leon later independently confirmed the essential facts of this event. He recalled seeing Nancy on the gurney, noted her swollen face, the presence of her son's father, and confirmed that the attendants were taking her to the service elevator for an angiogram. Ring and Cooper concluded that it was highly improbable Nancy could have perceived these details with her physical eyes, which were considered sightless at the time. Unnamed woman, Ring, Cooper study. Another participant in Ring and Cooper study was a woman whose sight perished completely as a result of a stroke at age 22. She had been nearsighted before that. During her NDE, she reported seeing her own body, the doctor, and the operating room. She stated, "I know I could see, and I was supposed to be blind, and I know I could see everything. It was very clear when I was out." Attempts at corroboration and inherent challenges. Researchers like Ring and Cooper attempted to corroborate the claims of their participants by seeking independent witness testimony and, where possible, examining medical records. However, this process is fraught with challenges. Passage of time. ND accounts are often collected months or years after the event, potentially affecting the memory of both the experiencer and any witnesses. Memory fallibility. Human memory is reconstructive and can be prone to inaccuracies or confabulation over time. Though NDE researchers like Ring argue that NDE memories are unusually stable and vivid. Lack of pre-planned targets. Most vertical claims arise spontaneously. Early NDE research did not involve placing specific unknown targets for potential OBE observation. Anecdotal nature of early claims. Many early reports of veridical perception, especially in the blind, were anecdotal and lacked rigorous documentation, sometimes dissolving into hearsay, unsubstantiated anecdote, and other dead ends. Even in one case, outright fabrication. The Sarah case, a dramatic account of a congenitally blind woman's detailed visual perception during surgery, which was later revealed by physician Larry Dossey to be a constructed composite, serves as a significant cautionary tale. Comparative insights, visual content across different populations. Comparing the NDE visual reports of congenitally blind, adventitiously blind, and sighted individuals can offer valuable perspectives on how prior sensory experience, or lack thereof, might shape these profound encounters. Congenitally blind NDEs. Individuals blind from birth have no prior visual memories or learned visual concepts. Their NDEs often include reports of experiencing light for the first time, perceiving forms, and sometimes complex scenes, all interpreted through a novel perceptual mode often termed Mindsight. The qualia of these experiences are, by definition, entirely new to them. The language they use to describe these visuals can be metaphorical or represent an attempt to map these unique sensations onto existing conceptual frameworks, which are primarily built from non-visual senses. Research into brain plasticity in congenitally blind individuals shows that their visual cortex can be repurposed for other senses like hearing and touch. While this demonstrates the brain's adaptability, it does not directly explain how this repurposed cortex would generate novel visual content during an NDE. Parallels can be drawn with research into the dreams of the congenitally blind. While some researchers argue for no visual dream content, others have found reports of some visual dream imagery alongside an increase in auditory, tactile, gustatory, and olfactory elements. This offers a comparative context for how the brain might generate imagery without direct prior visual input. The unfolding mystery. Implications for consciousness and future research. The phenomenon of reported visual experiences in blind NDEs, particularly when involving veridical elements or occurring in congenitally blind individuals, carries profound implications for our understanding of consciousness, perception, and the mind-brain relationship. It also highlights critical areas for future scientific inquiry. What NDEs in the blind suggest about the nature of consciousness, perception, and the mind-brain relationship? The data, though often qualitative and debated, consistently challenges purely materialistic and neurocentric views of consciousness. If it can be robustly demonstrated that consciousness can function and, indeed, perceive visually independently of a fully functioning brain and sensory organs, or in a manner that transcends their known capacities, especially in cases of congenital blindness where visual pathways are undeveloped or unused for sight, then the prevailing model of consciousness as solely an epiphenomenon of neural activity becomes insufficient. The concept of mindsight suggests that perception may not always be mediated by physical sensory organs. Consciousness might, under certain conditions, access information directly. This has significant implications for our understanding of qualiae, subjective quality of experience. How are visual qualia, such as the experience of light or form, generated or accessed in an individual who has never had sensory input through their eyes? 14. The reports from congenitally blind NDEs force us to confront this question directly. The phenomenon of NDEs in the blind, therefore, serves as a potent litmus test for any comprehensive theory of consciousness. Such a theory must be able to account for, or at least plausibly explain, these deeply perplexing experiences.